All right, what's going on, guys? This is Rob, and episode number 6 of WandaVision was really cool. I think it still leaves a lot of mysteries with regards to what's going on with Evan Peters' Quicksilver. By all standards of measurement, he is definitively the Quicksilver from the MCU, who was previously played by Aaron Taylor Johnson. I mean, in all reality, the more I thought about that, the more it didn't really seem that outside the realm of possibility for him to be the new Quicksilver. I mean, think about it. Like, Sony had Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man for like 3 movies. And then when they rebooted, they recasted him. And then the MCU got Spider-Man. Then they got Tom Holland. So it's not really outside the realm of possibility for them to be like, Quicksilver's back in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but this time he's played by Evan Peters. Done. And then we just roll with it, right? We always have whenever the same superhero is recast and played by somebody else. So not really outside the realm of possibility. What I do want to talk about here in this video, though, is the origin of Agnes, right? I want to talk about this for a second because this, I think, is a really cool concept. So let's build on the discussion that we had in the last video, right? Where we talked about the idea that like Mephisto and Nightmare are one and the same person, and they're basically the ones manipulating Wanda. Now, what we know in episode number 6 is that in the previous lines that we heard in like the previews and so on and so forth, the TV spots and whatnot, is that Agnes said something about the Avengers and are you here to save us? This gives us a lot more context in the sense that she was speaking that directly to Vision, and she's absolutely terrified, right? I mean, it's obvious that she doesn't have the power to stop Wanda, even if she really is Agatha Harkness, and she is somebody who can manipulate sorcery and magic and different things like that. Wanda's powers are just too far beyond her ability to stop or even remotely contain in any form or fashion. And so because of that, once she set back to normal, I started thinking and I was like, all right, so let's build on this idea of Mephisto and this only real evidence anybody has when you had Dottie say the devil's in the details and Agnes said that's not the only place he is, and like the fact that her husband's missing. So Agnes always says that the anniversary between herself and Ralph was June 5th. And so if we tie this into the idea of the Salem witch trials, which most everybody's doing at this point in time, then we can say with the Salem witch trials beginning back in 1692, that Agnes was potentially one of the first people to be put on trial or to be seized by the crazy folks at the time and ultimately condemned to death because of practicing witchcraft. Now let's say she was never an actual witch, right? She was just a woman who was in the wrong place at the wrong time, like in episode number 6, where she said that she basically got turned around, went down the wrong street, and then of course they ended up grabbing her, snatching her up, and that was the end of that. Now, while they have her tied to the stake, they're getting ready to set her on fire, that she's just kind of like, no, somebody save me, please. She cries out for help. And as we've kind of talked about in the past, that like everything freezes and stops, and she's just kind of like, what in the hell's going on, right? Even the pain of the fire goes away. And she's met by the arrival of Mephisto / Nightmare, who says like, what are you willing to give? Or, I can save you or whatever it is. And she never really considers the consequences of what she's doing. She literally just makes a deal with the devil, who turns her into a witch, and she in turn frees herself. But that's the quote unquote anniversary that she's talking about, which is when she first became not really a servant, but somebody who was eternally bound to Mephisto / Nightmare, in the sense that when she dies, her immortal soul will actually end up going to the realm of Mephisto. Now, let's say that that's the origin of her. The question is, how does that tie into the events that are going on right now? Why would this lead to like Mephisto, Nightmare, those guys kind of going forward and seizing Wanda and that kind of a thing? So one of the things we talked about in the previous video is that whenever we talk about the concept of Mephisto and Nightmare in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we talk about them as if there's something new, as if they somehow just came into existence or something along those lines. And we pointed out the possibility that maybe they've always been there. And this is actually given a little bit of credence by way of the Ancient One in Doctor Strange. Because one of the things that the Ancient One tells Stephen Strange when he's learning to become Sorcerer Supreme and things like that, especially after she dies, is that she had used the Time Stone on multiple occasions to find out what major threats were going to be facing the Earth or even the universe, and then stop those threats before they ever became a major crisis. That's how Doctor Strange came up with the idea to use that same tactic, and looking at any one of the 14 million possible futures where like Thanos ultimately wins, and finding the only one where the Avengers come out on top, which of course leads to Iron Man sacrificing his life. And so if we say that's the case, and the Ancient One discovered Nightmare / Mephisto as a credible threat out there, and that at some point in the future something was going to happen that didn't have anything to do with Wanda, but something was going to happen and she ultimately ended up locking them away, then it would make sense that if those spells and incantations were placed there by the Ancient One, then when she died, all those different spells suddenly vanished. Now we could also look at that and say, okay, maybe during this time period between the end of Doctor Strange 1 and like the beginning of Avengers Infinity War, when Stephen Strange was just doing his own thing, doing whatever he was doing in between those movies, that following the Ancient One's death, that he used his power to make sure those spells would continue on, and that Mephisto / Nightmare and whatever other threats exist out there in the multiverse of the universe would continue to be locked away. But when Doctor Strange was dusted by Thanos, those spells and things were gone. And maybe this was something something that Stephen Strange knew was going to happen, but it was kind of like, hey, like maybe these are threats that I can deal with at a later point in time, never considering the possibility that they would bond themselves to Wanda. Because in his mind, Wanda, from what he'd seen and really had no reason to investigate what other powers she may have, that she was able to manipulate the minds of others and she was able to use telekinesis. And that was it. There was never any indication that she had the ability to alter reality on any measure of a scale. And so if there was a concern that Mephisto/Nightmare were going to escape, that Doctor Strange could basically just lock them back up again. But the problem that we're going to run into is that now that they have escaped, or now that he's escaped, basically Mephisto/Nightmare or whatever, he's bonded to Wanda. And because her power is so extreme, albeit no one knew it at the time, that suddenly it's going to be a credible threat that Stephen Strange can't cope with on his own. Now, how this ties into the events of Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness, I don't really know. But I think that book ends pretty well into the theory that we had last video, where we talked about the idea of everything that was going on with Wanda and Nightmare/Mephisto, and explaining the nature of those guys and why they would want Wanda in the first place, the kind of White Phoenix or the Crown effect, different things like that. But I think it works. But as always with these theories, guys, make sure you punch holes in them. But if you guys want to know more about the theory that we had in the last video about everything that we just talked about, make sure you check the end screen here. And if you guys are interested in learning more about the character of Mephisto, make sure you check the other end screen that will send you to Comics Explained, where I have a video on the character that'll make you an expert in about 22 minutes. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.